I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is TCS, the TechCentral Show, brought to you by MTN Business. You know the drill by now. Subscribe at youtube.com/TechCentral if you haven't already. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our daily newsletter at techcentral.co.za/newsletter that goes out every morning at 5 a.m. with all the latest local and international tech news. Now, Dr. Bongani Mabaso is the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of the State IT Agency, or SITA. Bongani, welcome. Thanks for your time today. How long have you been in the SITA role now?
2 months on the dot.
2 months. And how are you finding it so far?
Very challenging, like drinking water out of a fire hose. It's a lot happening, lot going on, but it's also massive opportunity as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You've been poached from the private sector. You were at Standard Bank in a CIO role for a number of years, and before that, I think you were in a senior engineering role, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Transnet.
Yeah.
What possessed you to go from a lucrative career in banking into the public sector, where we know there's a lot of dysfunction?
Yeah, craziness. Look, I still ask myself that question. I think it's one of those things where I probably said no 30 times in my mind,
right?
And to various people. But SITA used the headhunting agency to identify the right people. Mm-hmm. And I was one of the people they identified. I think it's just one of those things where you go, if not me, then who?
Yeah.
I think we need to start to get, the right people, qualified people in the right positions. So although I said no 30 times, eventually I said yes, just because of the country call.
Right. Your public duty in a way.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I hope it doesn't give you too many grey hairs. You're the first permanently appointed CEO at SITA since Setumo Mohapi held the role, and that he left the organization about 5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Why has it taken so long to find a permanent replacement for Dr. Mohapi?
I wish I knew the answer. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's, SITA has undergone administration, and then it's had various people acting and the like.
Yes.
And then it's also had changes in minister as well. So I think changes in the organization as well as changes in the department haven't helped.
Yes.
In terms of stabilizing it. But we hope that now that I'm here, there's also a new minister in the department that hopefully things will start to stabilize. Yes, another one.
A very high turnover of ministers in the communications portfolio, which, as you know, which is problematic for the sector. So let's hope we see some stability now. I want to go into obviously in some detail about SITA and what your plans are on the restructuring and some of the announcements made by the previous ministers and how those are playing out today. Sure. But before we get to all of that, let's talk a bit about you. Sure. You've got a PhD from the University of Pretoria in machine ethics and computational morality. Wow.
Yes.
Why this particular field of inquiry? You completed this PhD about 5 years ago now? No,
it's like 3 years ago. 2 to 3 years ago.
But it was before the AI phenomenon that erupted last year with ChatGPT and all the rest of it. And suddenly machine ethics and all the topics around AI are suddenly top of mind. You produced this research years ago now.
Correct.
Why this particular inquiry? Why this field?
I think the last year in AI has proven that this is a very important topic.
Yeah.
In fact, I think just last week, the CEO of Google DeepMind, the CEO of OpenAI, they actually signed a paper. It's like a 30-word statement that just says...
I saw that. 22 words.
22 words, something like that. So you can see it's very topical. And the reason for me was just around making sure that human interest is protected as we advance AI. I'm pro-AI, right? I love AI. That's why I went into the field, because I'm an engineer. So maybe I can start... taking a step back. So I started at the UCT. I did electrical and computer engineering. That was back in early to mid 2000s. And I loved it. In fact, the computer science side of that degree, so it was a double major, was probably my favorite part of the whole thing. So it never really left me, right? I wanted to go more into that field. And so when I got the opportunity to do the PhD with UP, which they fully funded, by the way.
Okay.
So it was a scholarship.
Nice.
I couldn't say no.
Okay.
I had to take on the challenge.
Now, I know I'm asking a very unfair question here in asking you to give me the elevator pitch about your dissertation, but what were your conclusions? What did you focus on firstly? What was the specific area of focus, and what were the conclusions you reached?
Correct. So machine ethics is a very wide field, right?
Yep.
There's many sort of aspects to it. The one that I was looking at is called computational morality. So that is building and embedding ethics into machines. So it's an interdisciplinary PhD in philosophy and computer science.
Okay.
And the difficult part of it for me was I'd never done philosophy before, not at least to that level of detail.
Sure.
So I had to now start going into moral ethics, and look at virtue ethics and, just all these, classical moral theories that as an engineer you would not be exposed to. So that was the challenging bit. And then how to then, take these very abstract concepts in philosophy and somehow crystallize them enough that you can connect them into concepts in computer science. That was pretty challenging. So eventually I found an ethical theory called exemplarism, which is,
exemplarism.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So it's around, framing your moral ethics around exemplars in society. So you look at various people that you admire, and the theory says that you almost in a way imitate their traits.
Okay.
How they do things, how they look at the world, how they make moral judgment and the like.
Let's not model this on Elon Musk if we can.
Well, the reason for that is because I had to find a way to ground it for AI.
Sure.
Because for you and I, you can reason internally, right? You can understand, abstract concepts like morality, ethics and the like. But for a machine, how do you do that? So you had to model it against something else. So that's why I found that theory very useful for AI, because I could say, well, here's 10 examples of people that we want to, to be modeled against. So if you think about doctors, here are the 10 best doctors. If you think about engineers, here are the 10 best engineers that are ethical and the like. Now you learn to do like them.
Okay.
So you almost ground it indirectly as opposed to, it understanding those concepts, intrinsically, which is not possible right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you're now in charge of IT in the public sector.
Yeah.
How do you see AI being used in government in this country?
I think there's a massive opportunity. I'll speak about one, AI in procurement. For me, I'm looking forward to a time where procurement, or at least the awarding of tenders, that whole process end to end, has no human intervention in the loop.
Okay.
Because for me, I think it takes away the corruption out of the system, right? Yes, you might not be able to say every single step of the chain does not have somebody looking at it for consistency. But if 90% of it, for example, would be automated, I think it would just be fast, more secure, make sure that the right people get the right, outcomes. So I'm looking forward to that. So I think the procurement space is probably the next thing that's going to have massive transformation.
Is that practical though? I mean, a lot of suppliers will be watching and listening to this interview.
Yes.
And wondering, if you were to apply these rules in tendering within SITA, how possible is it? I mean, AI still seems to be in fairly early days, and we're looking at generative AI and more advanced forms of AI at this stage. I mean, reinventing the tendering process and the procurement processes in SITA to factor in AI, what sort of timeframes are we looking at here? And is the technology mature enough to do that sort of thing?
I think the technology is mature enough to do it. I mean, if you think about the PFMA, it's just rules.
Yeah.
Right? And rules can be codified.
Right.
And as soon as you can codify something, I can have lots and lots of examples of data points, right, around those codes and rules. So I think it's possible. I think it'll take a bit of effort, to get the right amount of data to train an AI to do that. But I just think it's just around how you codify it. So if you can go, this is how you input these fields around your tender process. So the company that you have, this is exactly how you enter it and the type of data that you require. So it has to be electronic, obviously. We have to move away from the manual sort of processes that we use right now.
Sure.
So I think it is possible. Can you do it all in one go? Probably not. You might look at steps of the value chain and then start to automate that and introduce AI. So the bid adjudication process, you might start with that, for example, or at least the initial filtering, you might also start with that, and then over time cover the entire value chain. But I think it's possible, given what my PhD was in AI, so I'm exposed to what is the art of the possible in that field, and I think it's definitely there.
Exciting stuff. But we've got very real on the ground problems as we stand at the moment.
Correct.
And one of those, as you alluded to, is corruption within the tendering and procurement processes around SITA and other aspects of government procurement. You've been in the role for 2 months now. I've had conversations previously with Dr. Mohapi about the corruption within the organization. In fact, you reminded me there was a detailed podcast about that, which we published about 5 or 6 years ago now, which is probably still on the site somewhere, if anyone wants to go and listen to that. But you've been in there for 2 months now. What have you found? Are you shocked? Are you pleasantly surprised? What's going right within SITA? What's going wrong within SITA?
Yeah, let's start with what's going right. I think from a financial sustainability perspective, the organization is in a very good space.
Okay.
And that's always a good sign of a recovery. I think the team that's been there has done really well to make sure that from a financial perspective, the organization turns around. Mm-hmm. So it's making its own money. It doesn't depend on the state to bail it out in any way, shape, or form. So it's sustainable.
Yeah.
So that's one. I think two, there's a very large customer base. That depends on SITA, right, for the provision of services, besides what the Act says. But, I've met with probably, 12 DGs and maybe 3 or 5 CEOs of agencies and other SOEs that have services that they consume from SITA. And you can tell, they'll complain for half an hour around service delivery issues and the like. Then I'll speak for 15 minutes, and then the conversation switches to how can we partner? How can we work together better to improve service delivery. So I think there's a very strong customer base. And I think that customer base wants to work with us. What they're looking for is 2 things really, price and speed. Can we make sure that the price is fair and competitive? And can we make sure that our turnaround times are quicker? If you can fix those 2 things, the customer base will continue to grow.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And is there any, there was some, I know over the years there's been some pushback against SITA by some elements within government saying we'd rather do this ourselves. And SITA's too slow to get these products. We need to have our own tendering process, et cetera, et cetera. Is there still some of that pushback you're seeing inside government?
Absolutely.
Is that entirely related to the speed at which SITA works?
Correct. No, absolutely. In fact, I think it's probably intensified, to be honest.
Okay.
Since I've joined, I've had no less than 10 client escalations, I think.
Right.
I'm sure there's maybe others that haven't come to me yet. And it's always around those 2 things. So people question the SITA model, right, which is the third thing they normally ask because of those first two things that are not working. So if price and speed were okay, no one would even think about the model. But because those things are not there, everyone goes, I want an exemption.
Right.
But you also have to consider the flip side, right? As an engineer, you want to consider the pros and cons. So what happens when SITA isn't there? And I think we don't often spend enough time asking that question. Because when SITA isn't there, issues of cybersecurity start to happen, as we've seen with some of our clients that have gone their own way. And then, a year or 2 later, you hear that they've been a victim of a cyber attack. And then they come back to SITA and say, look, can you help me close these gaps? They get exploited by, sometimes it does happen, private sector companies that deliver substandard quality of work, right? And because they're not IT experts themselves, they can't gauge that. I can just put a very nice presentation, slick one, and then convince you as, in your sector, in health or in education, et cetera, to go, this is amazing. But there's no depth in terms of what is behind there. And we've certainly found that with some of our clients where we've had to go in and realize this is built on very old technology. In fact, we're dealing with a case like that right now. I won't mention the client for privacy reasons, but very old technology, and SITA is now having to rework that.
Yeah.
So there are also very bad things that happen, when SITA isn't there.
I want to follow up on 2 things you just mentioned. The first is your clients. You work with a range of government departments and at both national and provincial and local level. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you work with SOEs as well?
Correct.
You do? Okay.
Yes.
So it's right across the board?
Right across the board.
Okay.
There's no limitation. Obviously, the SOEs and municipalities aren't obliged by the law, the SITA Act, to work with us, but
should they be?
They're free to. No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Look, I think in any case, SITA can't do everything. I think if you look where SITA was started around 1999, 2000, somewhere there, and the rate of change in the technology sector, right? The biggest technologies then were mainframe, maybe ERP systems and the like, and it was just the early days of the internet.
Yes.
You mentioned now around AI and the rate of change that's happened in the last year alone, right?
Yeah.
It's actually started way back in 2009 where we saw an inflection point where it started increasing exponentially. So the macroeconomic factors around the technology sector have just increased exponentially. And so your clients are now exposed to, their smartphones. They see how that works. They look at YouTube videos. They go to conferences, and so they want things right at an increasingly fast rate. And if you look at SITA, invariably we're pretty fixed capacity, right?
Yeah.
We can't scale up and down, to match our client demand. And so I think there's a bit of a mismatch there. So I always say that we can't do it on our own. One of the things that we're looking at is almost waking up the private sector arm of SITA to go, how can we partner better proactively? Because right now, if you think about it, Duncan, the only time I engage the private sector besides conferences is when there's a tender. But it's almost like it's an arranged marriage, right?
Yeah.
Like, I match up the partner with the department only when the tender is awarded. But it doesn't make any sense. Right now, you can trial an app on your phone, try it for a day or two and realize I don't like it, try another one for a day or two before you realize, okay, this is the one that I want, then you buy it.
Yeah.
How can we enable that for our clients? I think our clients are looking for more of that agility in the system.
So perhaps less focus on the procurement of the goods and services and more focus on providing services to your clients, holding their hands and helping them and advising them on what they should be doing and buying, etc.
Correct. Absolutely. I think we need to look. I mean, I think the role of a state ICT procurer will always be there in some shape or form. But I think in a sense we need to elevate that part where we are advising our clients around what's happening in the tech space, proactively, and then in parallel as well, engaging the private sector proactively as well. I'm envisaging a future where we can proactively vet solutions in the private sector and put them in what I call a SITA marketplace, so that it's available.
Yeah.
So before a DG says I want X, I can go, well, there's 5 of them that I've looked at. Which one would you like? You can trial them, you can look at them, just like any marketplace would work.
And then I wanted to ask about security, which you also touched on.
Yes.
And we know there have been some high-profile incidents involving public sector entities and SOEs. I think Transnet was a particularly vicious ransomware attack that happened, was it last year or the year before?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
And it knocked them out for a long period of time. I don't know if SITA was involved in that incident at all, but just broadly, security, I mean, it's obviously a rising concern. I think there's a perception perhaps that government IT systems are not very well protected. How much of a threat is this to South Africa as a country?
It's massive. In fact, there was a report that came out about a month ago that showed that South Africa is one of the top 5 worst targeted or most targeted countries in the world when it comes to cybersecurity.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just it's a number of factors. I think if I can focus on the public sector, I can touch on the private sector as well, because they're not exempt from this either. But to focus on the public sector, I think we just have various degrees of maturity in the technology that we have, the technology estate. It's fragmented. It uses various operating systems, various networking topologies and the like. So it's very difficult when things are varied to then protect in a standardized way. So you then have to have various ways of protecting those assets. And I just don't think we have enough coverage across the board, and not just from a SITA perspective, but also the government GTOs, right? For them to understand their own environment and their own estates to have that covered. So I think it is a massive issue. One of the things that for me was a bit of a shock anyway is the fact that we don't have a chief information security officer at the EXCO level. So there is an individual that plays that role at a lower level. But I think for me, that's a strategic role that should be there in EXCO every single day, because we're dealing with ICT. Cybersecurity is a strategic function. It's not something that you can deal with when the EXCO agenda item pops up, right? So that's one of the things that we want to fix. Looking to hiring a full-time CISO that can build the cybersecurity business, and then ensure that we can partner well with the private sector as well as our public sector clients. To secure the state. I think that's important.
Yeah. I mean, do you become proactive on that? Do you go out to each government department and say, we'd like to do an audit of your systems to check that you're actually up to date, your software isn't vulnerable to attack, et cetera, et cetera? Is that practically possible?
Yes, it is. So it's actually part of our performance, our APP this year.
Okay.
I think the number is 100. I might have to verify that government department sites where we want to go do exactly that, an audit. To give you a score to go, you are here and you're supposed to be there, and here are the steps you can take. And of course, with SITA, we can help you with that if you work with us. That's the one. I think we're also upgrading, our VPNs in our network across the board. Okay. To a higher version to allow us to be much more proactive. there is a standard. I think it's called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. Something like that. I can't remember the full abbreviation. But we're targeting to be at level 4, which is a much more proactive sort of state where you monitor cyber threats in real time and you can actually take some action in an automated way, actually. We're not quite there yet. We want to plan to be there by 2025. 2024, end of 2024. But right now, we just want to get a little bit closer to that.
Yeah. And I imagine you coming from the private sector, and particularly coming from a banking environment where security is the number one priority.
Yeah.
It must be a bit of a shock to the system coming into an environment where perhaps security is not treated as seriously as would be in a bank.
Correct. Yeah. Look, I mean, I don't want to say it's not treated seriously. I just think it's not strategic enough.
Okay.
So I think we've got the security operations, and we've got a security operations center. But I think for me, cybersecurity is a strategic function. Because now the prevalence of AI, right? Because it touches everything. There's AI now in security, and how you deployed that to do live threat detection,
right?
And stopping some of those attacks automatically.
Okay.
So I just don't think it's something that you can think about on a part-time basis. It's something that you have to, proliferate across your entire strategy.
In everything you do.
Exactly.
Let's change the subject a bit. I remember a previous Minister of Communications, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, put a caretaker administrator in charge at SITA while she worked on some sort of restructuring of its mandate. It was a big announcement at the time.
Yeah.
I think it affected some other organizations as well. USASA, the Underserviced Area Agency, was also placed under some sort of administration. And I never heard anything more about that after it happened. Did it all fall by the wayside when the minister moved on to another portfolio?
Yeah.
What happened with that restructuring and that administration that was happening?
Sure.
And what was the background to it? Why did she do it?
Yeah, look, I don't have enough history for why it was started then.
Right.
I don't think my knowledge of SITA at that point was as advanced as it is right now. But that project is still going. We're actually undergoing a SITA operating model review with the department, so with the minister, to look at its positioning and potentially changing the act. But okay. I don't think that's the main focus point. I think the focus point is around how do we remodel it so that we can answer those 2 points, those 2 questions that I asked earlier. How do we make sure that price is fair and competitive, and then the turnaround times are improved? That's the fundamental reason, and not just kind of doing it for its own sake. So there is a project that we're doing right now. In fact, just in our board meeting yesterday, I presented the first sort of view of that operating model and what it looks like, and how we can grow SITA and the like, and not just have a public sector business, but also look at how we can partner more effectively with the private sector. So that's something that we're hoping to complete in this financial year, in conjunction with our new strategy and operating model.
Okay, but this I'm not sure what the name of the formal process is that the minister announced, but she put the organization into some kind of administration. I don't know.
Yes, it was in administration for a while. It no longer is in administration.
It's no longer in administration.
Correct.
Okay. So when did it come out of this administration?
I assume probably more than a year ago, because there was an acting, the CFO was acting for around 8 months before I joined. So I'm assuming from that point in time, it was out of administration. There was a new board that started in February 2022.
Okay.
So I think that's roughly around the time when it came out of administration.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And the minister by then had moved on.
Yeah, and the minister by then had moved on. I think Minister Kumbudzo had come in.
That's right.
And now Minister Mondli Ngubele as well has come in as well. But the process is just SITA operating model review. SITA model review. That's really what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a new minister. I've lost count how many communications ministers we've had since 1994. I think this might be the 14th or 15th minister. Mondli Ngubele, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Now, he said in Parliament a week or two ago, he got up to do his budget speech vote in Parliament.
Yes.
And he got up and announced that SITA is going to build a broadband network with 6 billion rand to serve government departments. I think there was a bit of surprise. There was no indication prior, certainly in amongst tech journalists, that this announcement was coming. Did it come as a surprise to you? And why SITA and not Centec or Broadband Infraco to do this project?
Yeah. No, so I think it was maybe the way it was announced, but these are actually projects we're already running.
Okay.
So we've got 3 big broadband projects that we're running. One in Gauteng with the Gauteng e-government department, and that's, I think, is already in phase 3. We're running another one in the Western Cape with the Western Cape government. That's in phase 2 now as well. So phase 1 has been completed and rolled out, and we're running another one that's more than halfway through in the Eastern Cape with the Eastern Cape government as well.
Okay.
Both massive, or all 3 massive broadband projects that touch on schools, rural areas, government departments, isolated sites, using various technologies as well. So not just fiber, but where it's not possible because of infrastructure reasons, leveraging some of the investments the telcos have made to leverage LTE and the like.
Okay.
So they are already running, and I can safely say that they're actually going.
So this isn't a new project that the minister announced?
Not necessarily. I think what the minister was trying to emphasize is just more reporting on it and to create visibility around these projects. So I don't think they've gotten as much consolidated media coverage as perhaps they should have. I don't know.
And where does the 6 billion figure come from? Is that the amount of money that's been committed to building infrastructure?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And
yeah. So
SITA
all
spending
3 collectively is around 6 billion. I mean, it's not exactly 6 billion, but it's very close to it. Yeah.
That's the investment that SITA is making. So is this coming off SITA's balance sheet?
No. So our clients, through those clients, they are paying for it.
Okay.
It's not coming off of SITA's balance sheet.
I see. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. This is not some altruistic thing that SITA's doing.
No. It's a collaboration between the Eastern Cape, provincial department, Western Cape government, and also Gauteng Department of eGov.
So the provincial budgets are being spent.
Provincial government.
It's not SITA's money.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But if you remember our mandate, it's national and provincial.
Yes.
So it's well within our right to be able to help them to deliver that.
Okay. And how are those projects going?
They're going fairly well. I think maybe we need to report more on that. Like I said, 2 phases have been completed in Gauteng eGov. We're in phase 1 right now, so just started in the Eastern Cape, so a little bit behind the others. And then Western Cape has gone really well in the first phase and going into the second phase now as well to touch on more areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about skills? We know that there's a shortage of skills in IT, and specifically in certain areas like security and others. The private sector finds it challenging to find some of the skills it needs, particularly in security. It must be it must be doubly difficult in the public sector to get the skills you need. How much of a challenge is that for SITA?
It's a massive challenge. And I think, our CEO at Standard Bank, when I was at CIB, used to say that any organization is about, if you can do those 2 things well, you'll be successful. One is treat your clients right and make sure that you deliver to them. And then 2, treat your people right and make sure that they're happy and paid well and the like. Because if they're happy and paid well, they'll make sure your clients are delivered to and taken care of and the like. But if you can't find the right people that are properly trained to be able to do that, it's got a knock-on effect on your clients because you can't deliver quality work to your clients. So it's been a massive challenge, I must admit. Even at an exco level, we've tried now to hire a CTO. I've had 3 rounds of interviews with no results.
Really?
We couldn't identify an individual.
Wow.
People pull out of the process because the perception of going to work in the public sector, it's not something that's attractive. And maybe this podcast helps some people reconsider that because we need the best people.
Yeah.
I can tell you now, SITA needs the best of the best people to make it work. Because we it's sitting at such a fundamental, midpoint, I call it, in the ICT sector, where it's between the private sector and the public sector, right? Because we're almost a facilitator of exchange of goods and services between the public and private sector. And increasingly, we want to be a facilitator of the exchange of information as well between the private and public sector. And so I think we can facilitate growth in this sector in a massive way and start to export IP from this country to other countries. But for that to happen, people need to be willing to come and say, hey, I want to be part of that transformation, part of that change to grow the ICT sector, and not just think the best jobs are in the private sector. Look, it took a lot of convincing for me as well to join SITA, so it's not I don't necessarily blame anyone for thinking twice. I think anyone should think about it twice. But I'm hoping that, from what I'm saying, people are sort of taking pause and going, maybe it is possible. Maybe it is possible to go work at SITA. I can be qualified, know what I'm talking about, and go work there and make a difference.
Tell me a bit about your plan for SITA, your strategic plan. I mean, you've got a lot on your plate. Well, what are your top priorities? How do you fix the problems that you've identified, and then how do you measure that success and ensure that it's for the long term, and when you eventually move on, that the changes you've made don't just get swept under the carpet?
Right. Yeah. That's a challenging question. I've actually answered a little bit in what I was saying now, but I'll come back to it. I think the first thing is just to stabilize. In terms of service delivery. We've got a massive backlog in our procurement system.
Okay.
Tenders that haven't been awarded for 2 years. I mean, that type of stuff is not
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. I mean, it's not acceptable.
Yeah.
So we have to turn that around, and we are working, with the executives to try and turn that situation around. I think that's very important. And then 2, we're bringing in the role of COO. And the role of CEO will be focused solely on delivery. So
is that a new role?
It's a new role. It used to be there in the inception of SITA, but over time and different strategies, it got moved out. But I think for me, the impact of not having a COO is very visible. The handoffs between various departments is not great. It's quite typical for a client to phone and get told, well, actually, you need to talk to this department or not that department, etc. We do have a very excellent client interface, I must add, in our national and regional consulting structure. But they're just looking at the client. They're the voice of the client. Once the order is signed, the delivery engine need to step up and deliver. And that's what the COO will be looking at full time. So they will eat, sleep, and drink client, making sure that any order, whether it's stuck in application development, whether it's in the procurement space, service management, doesn't matter, right? That they make sure that it goes through without any delay in the system.
Okay.
And of course, identifying bottlenecks and then seeing what improved processes and systems we can introduce, right, to make sure that goes, quickly. So I think that's an imperative for us, to improve that. So that's the first thing we're going to be doing, just stabilize. The second thing that we're going to be doing is then looking at building an ecosystem around SITA that can stimulate growth in the ICT sector. And maybe just to go into a little bit more detail around that, we're quite proactive right now. The rate of, change of requests that are coming from our clients, are just way higher than the capacity that we have. In fact, I think we have around R1 billion in orders that we never execute every year.
That you never execute?
Yeah, just because of that fixed capacity. And so for us, it's around how can we then partner more proactively with both our clients and the private sector in a much more ecosystem, sort of way, so that we can, match up problems to solutions, in a much more seamless way. And this is talking to smart contracting, talking to marketplaces, talking to us, looking at various trends within our client base, looking at trends in our supplier base, and pre-vetting solutions and making them available. I think that's quite important, so that you can allow our clients to be able to try before they buy, to be much more innovative, and allow SITA to just play its role, which is to facilitate within bounds. I always use the anecdote of SARS. To go, if you want to buy your loaf of bread, you can go buy it at Spaza shop. You can buy it at your local Woolies or Spar or wherever you want to buy it. But if you look at your receipt, right at the bottom, it's going to say 15% VAT, which is Spar, right? Without having to, they don't tell you where to go buy, your bread. And I'm asking myself, what does that look like for SITA to go allow that exchange to happen seamlessly in an enhanced and automated way? But when you look at the bottom, it says 15% SITA, which is your cybersecurity, your hosting, and the like. But you allow the functional things to happen in a much more quicker way than we allow it right now.
Does there need to be a change in culture at SITA? Is the organization geared to be a service delivery organization? And if it does need to change its culture from that perspective, how do you do that?
Yes, it does need to change its culture. There is a culture. And look, I must admit, one thing that I've been very impressed by is when I've engaged, and not so much with the ExCo. I think the ExCo, you will always get what an ExCo will give you. But when you go to the levels lower down, speak to the project managers, the application development guys, etc., and you hear the real issues, and they'll tell you for half an hour what all the issues are and how this has gone wrong and the like. But after the half an hour, they give you an hour of solutions, right? They tell you how to fix everything. So people have that, almost like latent ability, latent knowledge, but they're just afraid to come forth with it because of being suppressed, maybe a culture of fear, just a toxic environment that maybe doesn't recognize and promote, good ideas. So I think for me, one of the first things that we have to do is just free up the human spirit within SITA. Bring back that creativity. And I think in a highly governed environment where corruption and state capture and all of these things are always there, it's always a very fine balance, to try and do that. But we've just tried to do that by just being much more open. My office, for example, in the last 2 months that I've started has been almost a revolving door of people coming in and out, because I want to learn from you and I want you to hear what I'm thinking as well, so you can take that back into the organization. That's one. The second thing is just around client centricity. And I think we're probably going to need some formal, engagement programs right from the top in the organization all the way to, the person that works, at the desk, to entrench client centricity, not just on a plaque on a wall, but in how we think, how do
you drive that through the organization, though? I mean, it obviously needs to come from you and be driven down through the organization. But how do you go about doing that in an organization that's probably quite set in its ways and has been doing it the same way for decades? You're coming in, you're saying this culture needs a bit of a shake-up. We need to be more focused on our clients, etc. But people are used to doing things in a certain way. How do you? I mean, change is uncomfortable for people.
No, it's very uncomfortable.
They tend to resist it. How do you go into an organization as the new guy and say, guys, we haven't been doing it quite the right way. This is how we're going to do it now. How do you get people to start to think
in that way?
I
think you do it by example. I mean, I love people. I love engaging with people. You do it by example and you create believers. I mean, there's a theory that says it only takes about 15% of people to believe something. And that will start to, almost be a snowball effect across the whole organization. So it's about targeting the right people and having almost pioneers in the right spaces across the organization, which is why, I mean, one of the things that I said when I first joined is, I would hope to meet every single one of the employees. I know it's probably not physically possible, but it's because you want to try and create those believers everywhere across the organization because they will carry that torch going forward. So I always say it's by example. So the example is we've delivered to clients. Can we celebrate that team that has done that very well? The example is how I interact and with clients and employees, right? And hopefully that will be something that can proliferate. Of course, there's structured programs you can follow around that, but ultimately it's by example. That's how we hope to do it anyway.
Last topic I want to chat to you about, and I apologize, not the most positive topic, but it is a reality in South Africa right now, and that's load shedding. You're an IT organization that services government. It must impact you quite severely. What has the impact of load shedding been on SITA, and how are you mitigating it?
I think our diesel costs have ballooned, something like 200%. I forget the exact figure. Since there's this latest bout of...
That's to run data centers, your offices?
To run data centers, switching centers for our networks, our offices, various offices across the country. So it's been a massive impact. I must say the team has done really well to make sure that, we've got the right infrastructure to mitigate against load shedding. The challenge now is then the logistics around diesel, making sure that it's filled up on time and all of that. And then, of course, you've got shortages, right? Because everybody wants diesel now. To run their generators. So that's the one. But the team has been, managed it fairly well. The challenge is, of course, is the last mile where your client is. Will they have the backups that's required? And often that's where things have failed, where people have said, SITA is offline. But actually, the government side is offline because of load shedding and they don't have any backups. And so having to work with our clients to see how can we mitigate against that? When can they bring their backup solutions online and could we potentially help them in some way? So that's been what we've been doing. The second thing that we're doing as well is reviewing our strategy around renewables. So what does that look like? In the context of the country with theft and vandalism and the like, it's not an easy topic. One would think that it's, bam, there's renewables and you're covered, but there's a lot of other factors one has to think about, in the context of our country. But that's something that we're currently reviewing as an ExCo, and we hope to start to implement some of those measures as well to supplement our diesel generators.
Now the Reserve Bank, there was some news yesterday, or the day before yesterday, that they are working with the banks and other financial services institutions.
I saw that,
in the event of a total blackout, which Eskom says is very remote, but possible. And it seems a lot of industry sectors are actually starting to look at this now. Banks, obviously a high priority area, but other industries as well are looking at disaster planning around a potential national blackout. If there is a national blackout, what does it mean for SITA? Is the government going to be able to continue functioning?
I think it's going to have a massive impact. I think let's be honest. We can probably function for a number of days, but I think at that point, if you have a blackout, I think the impact starts to be much wider than just SITA, because your logistics chain will probably start to suffer. How do you get diesel? How do you get diesel on time to the right places and the like? Look, we do have mitigating factors in place, like making sure that our diesel is always at an 80% level and the like. Okay. But I think in the event of a total grid collapse, I think the people that have implemented their renewable strategy will probably fare far better than those that just depend on diesel alone.
Yes.
So I think that's why, for me, one of the things that we sort of started to ask when I joined is, what's our renewable strategy and where are we with that? Yep. And can we accelerate that in our CapEx investment plan, which is what we're currently doing. Mm-hmm. So I think, would function, but would it be for more 10 days? I mean, I highly doubt it without, some severe impact. Yeah. We'd have to probably start looking at, rationing to go, what do we focus on in the main centers to make sure they continue to run while others might be able to suffer. So I think ramping up on that renewable strategy is very key.
You have a big job on your hands. I wish you luck. Dr. Bongani Mabaso is newly appointed Chief Executive of the State IT Agency. Thanks for speaking to TechCentral today.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.